How's it going, everybody? It's McKeever Conwell again, and welcome to this week's edition of the Startup Mac Vlog. This week I have a special guest, my co-founder and CTO,
Mark Campbell.
Mark Campbell, and my usual co-host.
Hey everyone, it's Alegado.
Hi, Kate.
Hey.
So, as a lot of you know, currently my company is part of the Accelerated Dream Adventures here in Philadelphia. And as we're going through the program, we ran into an issue of we just needed more technical talent, which is something that a lot of startups go through. And so this week we're going to talk about how we went out and found rockstar, or how a startup can find rockstar interns. And for that, we're going to point to my co-founder, Mark. So, Mark, please tell us, at what point did you realize you needed more technical help? And how did you come up with the solution of how to get over that hump?
I guess the point you have, so we have a deadline that we're trying to reach. And if the amount of work you can get done during the day and the deadline kind of don't match up, you know you're going to go over it, then you got to go, okay, we're probably either going to have to move the deadline or get more code done. And if the only way to get more code done is to add more people, then at that point you have to either never sleep or add people. And we're already not sleeping, so.
Yes, we're not sleeping. Literally, people, we put in 24-hour days. This is ridiculous. So once you realize you need to add more people, one of the hardest things it is to do in the startup is to find technical talent. So how did you kind of get over that hump of finding and sourcing technical talent? And you knew you needed, but it's just hard to find.
Well, I mean, right now we have options, but we went with the first one. Well, right now we're going with the first one, which is actually physically getting in front of people. I mean, you have websites out there that are dedicated to getting interns, and I guess at some point we can use that. Right now it doesn't look like we're going to have to need it, but you have things like internmatch.com. But we decided to go with, there was a top-tier hackathon in the area, Penn Apps, which is a huge hackathon. You got MIT students, Carnegie Mellon students, Harvard students, Yale students, Penn State students. So we went there to the hackathon looking for the smartest kids in the world.
Interesting.
I have a really good question on that.
Go for it.
So at the hackathon, and you name very, very prestigious schools, coming from like a startup where unless you've sold multiple startups underneath you, you tend to have a very low fund. So how do you attract those high-quality individuals that attended that hackathon?
You know what? That's a good question, and I definitely want you to answer it. But I also want to point out that at the same time there are all these high, top-tier talent, there were also top-tier sponsors there. Doing the same thing that we were there doing. You had your Googles, your Facebooks, in Apple. Then you have obscure ones. You have people like Imgur, which is an image service. They house images for people. You have all these funded companies there who are sponsors and mentors for the weekend. And what they like to do is they'll come to an event and they'll give out the latest versions of their code or their latest hardware. I think one company gave out a bunch of drones, and they say, here's our latest hardware. Build something with it, and you get to keep it. So you have all that going around, but you as a startup are still trying to attract this top-tier talent. So Mark, tell us how you went about that.
Okay. I guess it was from the first night because I'm winging this too. But I did learn. I iterated and learned from it.
Because this is our first time doing this, so we're learning a lot through the process.
So what was interesting is I found as we're going through and talking to these companies, what you find in a lot of these smart kids is that none of them are building these companies or doing these hacks that they're creating during this weekend. None of them are doing this stuff to make money, which is interesting. Like, okay, you kids don't care about monetizing this thing? And for most of them, it's like, no, we really just love the challenge of creating something that no one's thought of or that's just everyone thinks is impossible to do. So they were doing it for the challenge. So it's like, okay, well, I can't really talk about money because I figure money's not really interested in these guys. All these companies are probably just going to throw money at them. So I find money is not like their motivational factor. Their motivational factor is something challenging. for the most part. I mean, you get talking to like the really good developers. They're like, okay, that's cool and all, but I just want to build cool shit. Um,
Give an example of something cool that they built over the weekend.
so there was a group. There was a group of high school students. High school students. They took and built their own Oculus Rift. Like, mind blowing. And they
For people who don't
controlled
know,
it.
what's Oculus Rift?
So it's like this 3D glasses view where you put these things on and you become entrenched in this like 3D world around you. So they built the Oculus Rift that can control your MacBook. So they had like a remote control hand thing, and they had a Mayo by Atomic Labs, and they built like a controller where you control your entire MacBook through this homemade Oculus Rift. High school students. So stuff like that. It was ridiculous. So most of these kids in the room are smarter than me. Way smarter than me. I mean, we're talking high school. You know, imagine what the Carnegie Mellon kids were doing. And they were doing stuff on a whole nother level too. I can't even explain what they were doing. I just walked by and was like, okay, all right, that makes sense. So yeah, the first night it was just understanding what their motivational factors were. And then I found a pattern. So I came back the second night, and a lot of them were saying, hey, you came back. You know, after about 12 o'clock, all the other mentors left. And I said, well, okay, I think I just found something. All the other mentors leave around 11, 12 o'clock. So there's this time frame, because this hackathon is 24/7. There's a time frame between 1 a.m. and about 3 or 4 a.m. where they're just in code and no one's there to help. I decided to just stick around for an extra 3 hours. I got to know them a lot better. And there was and I find that, you know, because most of these kids are smarter than me, I can't really help them on code. Not too much code. But at the end of the day, when they graduate, they have to get into an industry. And they want to get into an industry I already broke into. I already understand very well. So I was able to be an asset in that department where they wanted to understand what the industry is like. And I was able to add value to them. And they found that to be useful to them.
And you were able to help some of them with code.
Yeah, I was able to help a few of them code.
By offering them some of your former code base,
Yeah.
giving them direction on things that
Gave
they haven't
them
done. Yeah. This stuff might help you. And I think that was key.
That extra 3 hours where no one's there is like, you know, prime time. There's no one marketing to them at this point. They're not, because when someone is marketing to them, there are multiple people marketing to them at any point in time between those hours of, you know, 9 a.m. and 12 a.m. Everyone's hollering at them. You got Facebook and Apple, all these guys are trying to talk to them at the same time. So there's a bunch of noise. Between 1 and 4 a.m., there's no noise. And I'm the last voice in their head. For a 4-hour time span, I have no competition.
Um,
I had another question on top of that one. I wasn't sure. So during that 4 hour, even that time that you were with them, at what point did you drop an inquiry in terms of their interest of being an intern, or was that never brought up at that point?
There were a few cases where it was brought up. A lot of times, my goal was just to understand what they wanted. I wanted to know their goals because here's the thing: if I wanted to ask about the inquiry to internship and it wasn't really a fit, then there was no point. So I really wanted to see what their goals were. I said, you know, ultimately, you know, what do you want to build? You know, what do you want to do? Because I know what kind of company we have and what we're trying to build. But if what they wanted didn't match up, I wouldn't even ask about an internship. So I'd ask them, hey, what do you want to do? You know, a few of them say, hey, I want to build my own company. I just don't understand where to start. I said, well, have you thought about starting with an internship? Oh, no, I haven't thought about that. Now we can go in that direction because now the idea is already in their head. Now it seems like a good idea at that point. I didn't have to ask them, you know, you want to work for me? You know, I really went about it like, hey, let's talk about what you want. And then after they tell me all the things what they want, I kind of paint the picture of what I'm going to bring to the table because I'm based on what they want. They've given me all their goals, and now I can paint the picture. Okay, here's all your goals matched up in a pot, and here's what we're going to give you. I basically just say, here, I'm going to give you all your goals in the form of an internship. Does that sound good? Now it sounds appealing because they told me what they wanted. I didn't have to, make up some kind of form of internship. They basically created it for me, and I presented that to them. So once I understood the goals, for a few of them, I asked, hey, would this match up with you? And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
And one key thing I also want to add that Mark did was a lot of the other mentors and sponsors, they walk around, they help, a few people here or there. Mark literally went around and sat with every single team. There was a good 50 teams, maybe more, in that room. And he sat with a large portion of them. Like, he literally sat down and gave time and gave very personal time with many of them and went back and followed up with many of them to see where they were. And as he's meeting with these teams, he's talking to them, he's finding out what their skill set are, what schools they go to, what their goals are, what they're proficient in. And at the same time, while he's taking notes on their companies and what they're doing, trying to help them, he's also going around rating them. He's trying to pinpoint which of these students would be a good fit for Redberry.
Yep.
Pinning them down, taking their name, taking their information, and keeping in the back of his head, hey, I might want to reach out to this kid at some point. Or this kid was a great iOS developer. He might be interested in helping us. This kid has no coding experience whatsoever, but he made a mind-blowing app in a weekend. He's a hustler. I want to keep his information down. And keeping track of that as you go along. And really, it's about being personal and helping them out. It's not just about recruiting. You really want to help students. The startup community is very much a pay-it-forward community. You really do want to help these kids. But at the same time, there is something that you want to get out of it as well. So it's a win-win. You make this a win-win for everybody. And Mark did a great job of painting that.
So what's next?
So I guess what's next is going to be what we're going to talk about in our next video, which is how to hire one of these rockstar interns. Now that you've gone to a hackathon, you've identified them, or maybe not a hackathon, but now that you've met with some rockstar interns, students, you can meet them at school, you can meet them online, you can meet them through another service. Talking to them and finding out about them is still the same process or similar process. So next step is, once you identify who's a rockstar and who you want to work with, how you actually convince them to be an intern. And we'll talk about that next week.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Hope everybody enjoyed this. We'll be back next week. How to hire a rockstar intern. Bye, everybody.
Bye.